We are excited to welcome our friends at the mall in Watkins, Glen. Let's do that right now. Welcome. And I am excited to share with you some good news. If you were with us last weekend, we had our last pitch or our last push for Walk for Water. And a couple of weeks ago, on a Saturday at the mall, we did a Walk for Water. Original goal was to raise 10 filtration units, 10 water filters. We blew past that. Last week I told you that we were at, I think, 32 or 33 filters. Now, today, I'm here to report to you that we blew past the goal. Last weekend was 50. We have subscribed to 67 water filters. Let's say yay God to that. And as Sue Dunlap reported back to me, let's give a shout out to Sue. I think she might be. I see you there, Sue, at the mall campus right now. Hey, Sue, thanks for organizing this. If we get a threefer, 3 times 67 is a bit over 200. Sue thinks it's possible that with that quantity, we might even get more than 3 for each one we purchase. So just assuming we get 200 million gallons of water over the next 10 years, my friend Peter helped me with the math here. A gallon of water has 16 cups in it, 16 8-ounce cups. Jesus said if you give as much as a cup of water in his name, you're giving it to him. So translating 200 million gallons into cups, according to my math, 3.2 billion cups of water over the next 10 years. Think of that. Isn't that great? And as Peter and I were talking about that, how many lives might that save? You know, people that, Sarah loves the microbes and all that kind of thing, but we're killing all those microbes, and we're offering people water that's much more drinkable. And so we're just excited about that. And I share that excitement with you. And then I've got one more little thing that I'd like to share with all of our campuses as I talk to you today, and that has to do with Lifetree. And maybe you've seen the Lifetree flyer. This coming week, Lifetree the topic is spiritual but not religious, and that's by the guy that wrote The Shack. Any of you familiar with the book The Shack? Anybody read that? Well, he's going to be featured on Lifetree, and then a week from next week, Thursday the 2nd of March at Regal Cinema. Have you guys at the mall heard of Regal Cinema? I don't know which theater, but they're going to do a preview the night before it opens. They're going to do a premiere showing for people like us from Lifetree or maybe other churches. We're going to be gathering at Regal on Thursday night. Watkins folks, don't worry. We've got a plan, but we'd like to invite you all to come to Lifetree this coming Monday at the mall, Thursday at Watkins, to get tickets to this preview showing for $5. A Regal for $5 is a pretty good deal. Would you agree? So we have 57 tickets that we want to make available to you. First come, first serve. Come to Lifetree this next Monday or Thursday and get your ticket. And then we're going to show up that following Thursday at Regal to get a chance to be among the first to see The Shack. So I just had those things to share with you. And now I'd like to come back to a subject that is near and dear to me, that I try to visit every year or so. And this is the theme song for our church, the vision statement, love God, love people, serve the world. You have a half page in your program that corresponds to my teaching today. Love God, love people, serve the world gets its basis from Mark chapter 12. You also find this in Matthew and Luke, where one of the religious leaders came up to Jesus and they said, what is the greatest commandment, Jesus? And he said, the greatest commandment is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. And then he said, oh, by the way, there's a second great commandment, and that is love your neighbor as yourself. So based on those 2 commandments, we see our theme of our church: love God, love people, serve the world. I have talked about this numerous times over the last years, and it helps me to come up with a different angle, and I hopefully help you too. I would share with you that love God, love people, serve the world can be expressed in 3 dimensions of discipleship, and I've called it up, around, and out. Last weekend we talked about up. That's love God. That's worship. We love God because he loved us first. One of Sarah's favorite verses, I think, is Romans 5:8. Um, God commendeth his love toward us, and that while we were sinners, Christ died for us. Did I get that right, Sarah? And 1 John 4:19 says we love because he first loved. He first loved us. God goes first, and then we love God back. And that's our first emphasis, is our up dimension of our faith. Today, I'd like us to think about how we love around us, that is, love the people around us. And to talk about the love for people, I would lift up to you a very short lesson in New Testament Greek. It's called Koine Greek, which meant common Greek. And while we use the word love in the English language, there are 4 different ways of translating love, at least 4, in the New Testament Greek language. And the first one is storge, S-T-O-R-G-E, and that is a familiar love. It's, I love this chair that I'm sitting in, or I love the members of my family, kind of a generalized, low-level familiarity love. And then there's the kind of love, the Greek word eros, E-R-O-S is the way we spell it in English. That's erotic love. That's sexual attraction, that aspect of love. In English, we use all these words. We use the word love interchangeably. A third kind of love is philos, P-H-I-L-O-S, or phileo is the verb form. And that is a love between equals. You love that person and they love you back. It's brotherly love. The city of Philadelphia means city of brotherly love. The philos part of that, P-H-I-L, is brotherly. Adelphia is love, city of brotherly love. And then the fourth love in the Greek language that I would lift up to you today is agape or agape, depending on how you want to translate that. And that's originates from God's love for us. And God so loved the world, agape, that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believed in him should not perish but have everlasting life. So God agapes us, and we agape God back, if you will. That highest level of sacrificial love, willing to lay down your life even for somebody. Now, I'd like to read from the love chapter of the Bible, often referred to that way, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. You have in your notes part of what I'm going to read, and it's verses 4 through 7. And so I'm going to read the first 3 verses, have you read the next verses with me, and then I'll complete the chapter after that, okay? So it begins like this. The Apostle Paul says this: "If I could speak in any language in heaven or on earth, but didn't love others, I would only be making meaningless noise like a loud gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy, if I knew all the mysteries of the future and knew everything about everything, but didn't love others, what good would I be? If I had the gift of faith so that I could speak to a mountain and make it move, without love I would be no good to anybody. If I gave everything I have to the poor and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it, but if I didn't love others, I would be of no value whatsoever." Now read the next part with me, would you? "Love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. It does not demand its own way. It is not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance." And where is that? 1 Corinthians 13, 4 through 7. I didn't call that a memory verse, but it's a key passage for your reflection this week. Now I want to go back and finish that chapter, verses 8 through the end of the chapter. "Love will last forever, but prophecy and speaking in unknown languages and special knowledge will all disappear. Now we only know a little, even the gift of prophecy reveals little. When the end comes, these special gifts will all disappear. It's like this: when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child does, but when I grew up, I put away childish things. Now we see things imperfectly as in a poor mirror, but then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete, but then I will know everything completely, just as God knows me now. There are three things that will endure: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. So, the love chapter, I was talking to somebody this week, and they said, well, I think they wrote that right just for weddings, didn't they? Well, no. In fact, here's a profound understanding. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 follows 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and precedes 1 Corinthians 14. How is that for depth? I just wanted you to know that. And if you read 12 and 14, or you read the rest of 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians, you see that this was a very conflicted church. The church in Corinth was not a great church. There was a lot of struggle. There was a lot of pride and competition and immorality. Corinth itself was a Greek city that was known for its immorality. But some of the things that went on in that Corinthian church even embarrassed the heathen outside the church. It was that bad. And so Paul is saying to them, when you're talking about chapter 12 and the gifts of the Spirit, and then chapter 14, the gifts of the Spirit, I need to interrupt what we're talking about here to talk about love, because this is the key. This is what you have to get. And the word he uses for love in this chapter is agape. It's not originally written for weddings. So, we sometimes think, well, it must be they just wrote that. What a nice passage for weddings. But it's not limited or intended even for weddings. It fits weddings very well, but it's not really the purpose. To look at those 4 verses that you read with me, love is patient and kind. The original, one of the English translations originally said, love is long-suffering. That's compared to short-suffering or short-tempered. Love is long-suffering and kind. It's not, and then there's a bunch of nots. I put negative signs over the word jealous. It's not boastful, negative sign. Negative sign proud, negative sign rude. It's not any of those things. Love does not demand its own way, another negative. Love is not irritable. It keeps no record of being wrong. All these things that love is not, does not rejoice about injustice. But then we have some pluses. But instead it rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Love never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, endures through every circumstance. And so we see love lifted up as a great quality, this agape love that Christ can do in our hearts. Now, I was wrestling with whether 1 Corinthians chapter 13 was the way to go when I was going to talk to you today about loving people. And I'm a great... I don't listen as much as my wife does, but Family Life Network, anybody discover FLN? Well, if you haven't, just to give you a starter, if you're in the general Elmira area, 90.3 is the FM location. 102.5 is another one. If you're in the Watkins area, I don't remember the numbers, but Linda's found them all. She's got a whole 4 or 5 buttons that we push as we drive from Elmira to Watkins. This morning, as I'm still wrestling with what am I going to talk about loving people, I heard this song on Family Life Network, and it's called The Proof of Your Love, and the group is called For King and Country. It's 2 guys and 2 brothers that sing together. And just to read some of the words, and we're going to play this during communion today. So let my life be the proof of your love. Let my love look like you and what you're made of. How you lived, how you died, love is sacrifice. So let my life be the proof of your love. And then toward the end of the song, when it's all said and done, when we sing our final song, only love remains. Only love remains. So let my life be the proof of your love. Let my love look like you and what you're made of. How you lived, how you died, love is sacrifice. So let my life be the proof of your love. I love that. Now, we have in your notes verses 4 through 7, 1 Corinthians 13, with some blanks in there. And some of you already started to fill in the blank, and I'll bet you said, oh, I know, it's love. Write in love every time there, right? Peter did that. Okay, I want you to try something different. Yes, that's the word. But instead of love, I want you to say this loud and clear with me. wherever the blank is, we're going to say Jesus. And when we get down a few lines where it says does not demand, it's obviously his own way. Okay, so let's do that. Ready? On your mark, get set, go. Jesus is patient and kind. Jesus is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. Jesus does not demand his own way. Jesus is not irritable, and Jesus keeps no record of being wronged. Jesus does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Jesus never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. Is that true? Could you interchange the word Jesus for love? Okay, one more thing now. I want you with equal enthusiasm and volume to read that with me one more time and put your name in those blank spaces. Okay, are you ready to do that? I'm going to say Bill, but I don't want to hear Bill so much as hear all of you participating too. So I want this with volume. Turn up your volume and say this like you mean it. Bill is patient and kind. Bill is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. Bill does not demand his own way. Bill is not irritable, and Bill keeps no record of being wrong. Bill does not rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever the truth wins out. Bill never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, and endures through every circumstance. Amen? Can you say that? Whoops, it's kind of hard, isn't it? Have I preached enough for you to have something to think about today? Well, we're going to come back to that in a minute. But I just would like us to think about our love for people and God's call to love God and then love people and what that means. Somebody likened the Christian journey to being on an ocean liner. Now, we just have had, this last week, I know of at least 2 couples from our church family that got back from cruises. In fact, I talked to them. You should hear them whine. They left 90 degrees and came back to New York at 20 degrees. What's there to complain about there? But in the case, these 2 couples got a chance to be on a cruise ship or an ocean liner. And somebody made the comparison of that ocean liner to being our Christian journey. And the ship has its destination. It's eventually going to end where it's headed. It's going to be at the port where it's supposed to be. But in the meantime, on the cruise, I've never done a cruise, but I'd like to try it someday. You get to do what you want. You know, you can eat and sleep and drink and play, and you have all this freedom, and you think you're in control in a way, but guess what? That ship's going to end up where it's going to end up. Well, that's kind of like our life. We think we have all this luxury, you know, the luxury liner of life that we can do whatever we wish, but ultimately the captain is in control, and we're going to end up there. So how do we treat each other on that cruise? How do we relate to each other when people irritate us, or maybe they budge in line at the buffet, you know, and you're at your 4th buffet of the afternoon and somebody got in your way, you know, or I don't know if our people from our church did that or not, but we're called to love people as we love God, and that's part of the cruise. Now, something else that just clicked with me is the expression shakedown cruise. And before they invite people to pay money and go on these cruises, they may give them a really reduced rate or let them go for free on what they call a shakedown cruise. And as I understand that, I did a little bit of research. Originally, they had shakedown cruises when they converted from ships that were powered strictly by sails and air to engines and motors, and the shaking of the motor would vibrate and things would fall apart. And they would go on a shakedown cruise, taking all the ship mechanics and the tools so that they could fix it as they went, because literally the shakedown meant that the engines sometimes shook apart and they had to put them back together as they're going. So the shakedown cruise, sometimes it's called a sea trial. And we're put out to sea to shake down the problems in our lives. And the problems at PAUMC, one church, many locations. As we've gone to many campuses and many locations, we've discovered that there are some things that shake down, you know, and some things that don't work the way we thought they would, whether it's technology or music or children's ministry or hospitality, or all kinds of things can go wrong, and we've experienced probably every one of those glitches. But we're on a shakedown cruise, and we haven't arrived, but we're going to that destination. How can we love people and deal with those glitches and those problems that sometimes relate to other people? And when you read that verses 4 through 7 and put your name in, did your name fit? Maybe that was part of the shakedown for you today. Maybe you need to come to grips with, how can I not only love God, but love people in a Christ-like, agape kind of a way. And so as we continue on our shakedown cruise, and we seek to love people and have Christianity lived out every day, I encourage you to look at 3 statements there in your notes. Read them with me. These are kind of pointed statements, okay? Let's read them together. The first one, to apologize, is the bravest. The first to forgive is the strongest. The first to forget is filled with faithfulness. Amen? We're called to practice that kind of quality in our lives. When Linda and I were first married, we lived in Vallet, New York. Sparky and Nan, do you know where Vallet is? They happen to live there. Some of you know Sparky and Nan and the Belanger family. We lived in Vallet, and one of our first Saturdays in Vallet, the house that we lived in had a real problem with the sidewalk. And so some of the guys in the church and I poured cement that day and fixed the sidewalk and covered it that night because there was a rain shower in the forecast. And I went out the next day. That was a Saturday. I went out Sunday after church to remove the canvas or the tarp that was covering the cement. And I discovered that Johnny from next door had written all over that cement. And boy, was I ticked. And Linda reminded me, guess what? I had just talked that day about 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and what it is to love like Christ. And she said, excuse me, but what about your sermon and your reaction right now? And very resourceful, I said, well, it's one thing to talk about love in the abstract. It's another thing to talk about love in the concrete. We're called to practice in concrete ways things that God reveals to us, and to love people as we love God. I had a great experience earlier today with the guys from Watkins, Glen, in Bible study. In fact, we set a record. We had 6 guys there today, 4 of them in Watkins, 2 in Florida, but we Skyped with each other. And most encouraging and inspiring to me were the couple guys that are the newest at the faith. And they're asking all these questions, and they're afraid that they're taking up too much of our time, and they're asking dumb questions. And there is no dumb question. And one of the other guys, who's a few months in now to the walk with God, said, Bill, what was that question you asked us last week? And that question I asked you last week, I'm asking you again today. Read it with me. It's on the bottom of your notes. Am I willing to give as much of myself as I can to as much of God as I can understand? So as we love God and we seek to love people and we realize our inadequacy, we come back and we say, well, I'm going to do the best I can. I want to give as much of myself as I can, God, today, because I blew it yesterday. As much of you as I can understand, I want to serve you today. Amen? Amen.